have oftentimes people that, well, if you aren't doing anything wrong, what do you have to worry about? And for some folks, there's like that. No, that's how we're supposed to be different than other countries. Other countries are accustomed to their government surveying them at every given moment, and we are supposed to be different. But aside from that, what is the information, or how is it being used? Is it being collected? We know in Bolivar, for example, they noted that after it was that they had signed an agreement with Flock, the company changed some of the terms and conditions in terms of who would have access to the info, and so even aside from those who feel as if there's some potential upside in terms of, so you sacrifice a little liberty for a little security, they still have concerns about, big corporations and what is it that they're doing with this information. And so we're increasingly seeing some of these departments that are just saying, nope, we're not going to be doing this. I want to share with you this insane New York Post story. The story's not insane, but what it's about, and it's this gal that was arrested with a plot underway in order to carry out a terrorist attack on the state capitol in New York, flee to Syria, and then come back to the United States and hit bigger targets. She had two roommates, and the New York Post met with the two roommates or interviewed with the two roommates, and they were like, yeah, she used to be normal until, and you read through this piece, and it's your typical liberal white chick, and the incoherent and hysterical behavior, and I was just thought it was an interesting read, so I want to share some of that information with you as well. Gas prices, by the way, should be dropping a couple of weeks earlier than usual with the switch over from the more expensive summer blend to the winter blend. Generally, that happens mid-September, but the Trump administration has done a little get out of that early waiver, and so that is going to begin about 2 weeks early, though they say it'll still take maybe a week and a half or so for that to be reflected at the pumps. Generally speaking, it makes a difference of 15 to 30 cents a gallon, depending on a number of other conditions as well. And obviously, this is something that is due to the prices that are still lower than the previous administration, but they're higher than this administration has had them before. It's a real weird sort of grading against yourself on a curve. People that are anti-Trump, I know there's a sign that is, it's a billboard on West Sunshine, somewhere around Menards. It's somewhere in that area. And it is all about the gas prices under Trump. And it's crazy because they're excuse me, the people who hate Trump, they're not comparing gas prices to Biden gas prices, because gas prices are still, even with everything going on under Donald Trump, if we're going to assign credit and or blame to Donald Trump regarding what is going on, like wholly and completely, that it's still Trump has managed to keep gas prices lower with everything that's going on, including war with Iran, than Biden was able to without the war in Iran. So they're not comparing to Biden prices, though they want you to, they're hoping that you will equate the higher gas prices to the Biden administration, and as if they were lower then. They're hoping that you don't remember. They're dishonest in this approach. But what they're really comparing, ironically, Trump's high gas prices to are Trump's low gas prices, because they can't compare them to the low gas prices of the Biden administration because they were higher than they are even now. And so in order to criticize Trump, they have to compare him to what the gas prices or the results of his policies of the gas prices before Iran, in which they were a lot lower. I mean, that's the logic of the left. We've got weather coming up, also traffic. The Pyramid Roofing Company text line 447 KSGF. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for rain in the morning, otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 84. Tonight, mostly clear with a low around 68. For your Tuesday, mostly sunny with a high near 91 and heat index values as high as 100. And for Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 90.
All right. You heard Carissa note it. Willard Police Department decides not to renew contract with Flock. Police Chief Tom McLean deciding not to renew that department's contract with Flock Safety following growing pushback from residents. According to the city of Willard, the police department made the decision due to residents' concerns over the value and the cost of the Flock program. The contract will expire in October. Chief McLean saying the Willard Police Department is committed to listening to the people we serve. Throughout this program, residents shared their thoughts and concerns, and we took that feedback seriously. After careful review, we've decided not to move forward with renewing the Flock safety contract. Now, I really just like that ending in terms of a city being responsive to the citizens. It's to me completely understandable why people in law enforcement whose top or perhaps sole priority is to seek out technology or devices that allow them to more easily catch people, and that's their sole focus. And I get that, I understand that, but that doesn't always jive with what the people want, particularly when it comes to issues of Fourth Amendment and privacy, and there's debate and discussion over that. Some argue that you have no right to privacy when you are out in public from the government. The government has every right to constantly monitor you as long as you are not inside your home. Others disagree, and some, and I tend to fall into this category, regardless of the outcome of that debate, just because government has the right to do it, if you want to believe they do, it really doesn't mean that it has to, There tends to be oftentimes this sense that, well, if it's decided something is constitutionally allowed, that means the government must do it. No, that just means that the government is allowed. Should it be something that is constitution, not a violation of our rights, that doesn't mean that it has to be done. And we tend to think, well, gosh, I lost the constitutional argument, so I guess that means I'm wrong. Government should do it. No, it doesn't mean that. So I equate law enforcement, and I don't condemn them for it when they are viewing it through their lens of tools to help them nab the bad guys. To me, it is similar to doctors that during COVID genuinely believed that the answer to everything was the COVID shot, so they're doctors, right? They're experts in that area. But that doesn't mean they're constitutional experts. Many of them felt that we should be forced by government. There are many people in the medical community that would be touted out, that would argue, if you go to the emergency room with a heart attack and you haven't gotten the vaccine, you shouldn't be treated. That people should be put in jail if somebody catches COVID from them or from you, and you did not get the vaccine, that you are murdering people. And so it is government's job to nab people up, to arrest parents who took their kids to the park. And just because it was a doctor that said that, because a doctor is supposed to have expertise when it comes to vaccines and medicines, that doesn't mean that they're right about government's role in it. And that's how I equate, that's how I view the perspective of a lot of folks in law enforcement when they'll talk about, well, here are all the benefits. Okay, no, get that. I understand it. But that is your perspective as somebody who is simply talking about the tools' effectiveness in grabbing up the bad guys. But it's a whole different discussion as to whether or not it is worth the trade-off of our society to trade secure or trade a little bit of liberty for the promise of a little bit of security. And so I understand why it is that law enforcement oftentimes backs this sort of thing. So I think when you have somebody in law enforcement that is a chief of police in particular, and I say that because if you're a sheriff, you're elected by the people. So if the people overwhelmingly are like, hey, this is a horrible thing, we don't want this, you're an elected official, and it's a little different because you're worried about getting reelected. And so the people's opinions on these things have a little bit of or in all likelihood, have more impact, as opposed to if you were just hired by a city. And to be a person in law enforcement, listen to the citizens, and recognize and believe, as I do believe that the Willard police chief does believe, that it's a useful tool, but to weigh them and be like, well, the citizens just don't want it. And when it really comes down to it, part of public safety is a trust with the public, and that trade-off isn't worth it for us. Okay, maybe we're able to catch an additional bad guy now and then, but is the lack of support in the community, the lack of trust in the community that may come along with the flock camera situation worth the trade-off? And, clearly in some instances, that decision is leaning more towards a trust within the people. Now, I don't know what exactly went into the calculations of the Willard police chief, other than he said, hey, it was community feedback. It was clear people did not want this. And so that's why it is that this decision's being made. Pulaski County also has announced that they are going to discontinue use. And then Bolivar, as you know, went ahead and even before dismantling them began covering them up. So this is something that is happening increasingly. I'm sure that this gives hope to people in Springfield that are also trying to rid the city of the flock cameras, though Springfield has a real reputation, very well earned, of not giving a crap what the citizens want. And as one of the deflock people that was on the show here a few weeks ago said, the chief of police was very dismissive and claimed that, it's just a handful of people that are concerned about this. And so I don't think it matters if it's 90% of the population. This is a city that has almost, to the point of appearing as if they're making a point, define what it is that public sentiment is. And so I who knows, could be completely surprised. But I do not think that we're going to see the sort of response from the city leaders of Springfield that some of the area communities and communities across the country have demonstrated. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. I want to make one final point. I've made it before about the flock cameras, but to me, it is perhaps one of the most overlooked aspects of flock cameras, and it is pushed in the name of public safety. I think we can all agree on that. But it's public safety in the context of catching the bad guys. Now, and sometimes that's Amber Alert sort of situation. The problems that we have in terms of crime in this country are not due to a lack of being able to catch criminals. Of course, that does happen. Unsolved crimes, people get away. But that's not where the real problem lies. You look at any part of the country that is really struggling with crime, and it is a recidivism rate. It is, and you'll hear the statistics, and I'm sure they vary depending on the part of the country, but the vast majority, like 90% of crimes are committed by the same 1% of people, those sorts of statistics. And it's the story that you'll hear over and over again. Here, somebody is, they murdered someone, and they'd been arrested 87 different times, and they've been released. Over and over again. They never serve time, or they serve a week, or they're let out early. And that's where the real problem is. Criminals don't fear getting caught because they know that they will very soon be released. We've even seen instances in which those criminals that get caught mock police and the idea that this doesn't matter, I'm going to be out tomorrow. Even when we're talking about situations including murder. I want to say it was the two, I believe they were teenagers in Las Vegas that filmed themselves running over that guy on a bicycle and laughing about it. And one of them during booking just quipped that, you're not going to have me long. I'll be out of here before too long. That's where the real problem is. And so the idea that flock cameras are going to make a real meaningful difference in terms of creating a safer environment, I reject that assertion because while, again, there may be instances in which people otherwise would not have been caught and they are caught, that's not where the real problem lies. It is a system that constantly takes these people who have been caught and just throw them right back out on the streets, particularly if we're talking about illegal aliens and sanctuary cities where they deliberately do that. I mean, it's in their minds, it's a virtue to do that. As long as that's happening, catching them it's irrelevant. All it does is stack up the number of arrests that get mentioned when the person eventually kills someone, and then it just becomes part of the news story. Incidentally, while this is, I mentioned the illegal alien component, while this is really painted as bipartisan, much like data centers, that was just one of the few things people on the left and the right can agree on. People on the left who are opposed to flock cameras, it isn't because of surveillance of legal citizens. It is because they are afraid that it is being used or will be used to enhance the capture and deportation of illegal aliens that are in this country. So, the more constitutionally minded citizens are worried about the impact and loss of liberty on law-abiding citizens, while the left, their concern are people who are lawbreakers. And you just can't get a more clear contrast between the left and right in terms of priorities in this country when it comes to the focus of concern for flock cameras. Coming up, Hillary Clinton reportedly planning Bill Clinton's funeral as health concerns mount.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a slight chance for rain in the morning, otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 84. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 68. For your Tuesday, mostly sunny with a high near 91 and heat index values as high as 100. And for Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 90.
Gateway pundit Hillary Clinton has reportedly begun making plans for the eventual funeral of her husband. Former President Bill Clinton's concerns continue to mount over the 80-year-old Democrat's health. Radar Online reporting that Hillary, who's 78, has started arranging an elaborate memorial service while Bill is allegedly reviewing his estate and making potential changes to a will reportedly valued at $120 million. Public service sure does pay. Do you think you'll hear these stories of someone who dies and then, the widow, obviously front and center, but then there's, maybe some woman who shows up that was long said to have maybe had more than a friendship with the deceased, and there's a lot of drama. How dare you come here? And she said, but he was part of my life too. And
There's going to be a whole row.
That's what, like a row. I mean, maybe a section. Can you imagine? It's almost going to be like a wedding. Are you here for the groom or the bride? And you could have an entire section that's nothing but women who, one, voluntarily submitted to his sexual desires, and then those that maybe not so voluntary. There could be a different tiered system for those who were victims as opposed to those who were willing participants. You do wonder if that will be part of it. According to Radar, Hillary's tentative plans include a traditional funeral service at Washington's National Cathedral in D.C., followed by Bill's burial at or near the William J. Clinton Presidential Library and Museum in Little Rock. One presidential historian, cited by the outlet, speculated that Clinton could even request to be buried near the library's rooftop garden, which was described as one of his favorite retreats. It should be noted, funeral planning for former presidents is not necessarily evidence of an immediate medical crisis. I mean, he is 80 after all. You got to start planning this at some point. So he's 80, she's 78. So as it notes, doesn't mean he's on death's doorstep, but he has, over the years, really deteriorated visually and even when he speaks in terms of his health, as one does at that age. Well, except for Donald Trump, who just is Superman, physically, it seems. Still, the report arrives as Bill Clinton enters his ninth decade following years of serious medical problems, increasingly frail. Public appearances, Clinton turned 80 on August 19th, and they note, still attends public events, including Obama's presidential dedication in June. Even People magazine acknowledged, though, that the president appeared to be more visibly frail in recent years. So that's sort of the latest. So here's what I genuinely am curious of. If Bill Clinton dies while Trump is still president, will Trump be uninvited? Will Hillary Clinton's bitterness require him to stay away? Will he come anyhow? That would just burn her up. I'm sure he would not be allowed to speak. But here's the thing. That when he dies, if Trump is still alive, he's going to be asked about Bill Clinton, and he's going to say very nice things. You can almost guarantee that Trump will say nice things about it. Now, he may make some little offhand quip, but ultimately, that's just how Donald Trump is. I wanted to share with you from the New York Post a story regarding the alleged New York ISIS terror plotter, Jabba the Hutt, the quite girthy liberal white woman who converted to Islam and suddenly went from what friends and family and roommates described as a pretty normal, loving mom to some sort of psychopath. There's some interesting tidbits in this story, and her roommates apparently had contacted law enforcement on numerous occasions because of death threats from her, but they were like, nothing we can do. She's just a crazy liberal woman. White liberal woman. Sean Galvin writes in the New York Post, a converted radical Muslim charged with plotting an ISIS-linked bombing at the New York State Capitol was the roommate from hell who allegedly threatened to blow up their apartment building, her housemates told the New York Post. Jessica Bowie, 35, went on a months-long reign of terror in her Albany apartment that only ended when she was kicked out for not paying rent, roommates Zephyr Brennan and Ivory Thomas said. From January through July, Bowie blasted Islamic prayers at all hours of the night from her bedroom in the Hudson Avenue townhouse and often resorted to violent threats when confronted about her disturbing behavior, the roommates claimed. Quote, looking back, the Arabic hymns at 2 a.m. should have been a real red flag, Brennan said. That might be one of the most hilarious quotes in this entire... Looking back. You know, the really loud, blaring... she said Arabic hymns. Islamic hymns would be, much more accurate. But yeah, at 2 a.m., that constant, that should have been a red flag. Oh, it was. Chillingly, in her last 2 weeks at the home, Bowie never took off the head-to-toe Islamic garb and concealed her identity entirely from Brennan, who she had known for years prior to converting to Islam, the roommate said. So the way that this story reads, which this is bizarre, at least the one roommate who had known her for years did not realize that it was her as they were roommates because she was completely covered in garb. She didn't realize that this was this person that she actually knew. Roommate Thomas, 23, told the New York Post she called police 7 times since January on Bowie, including to report death threats, but the Albany City Police did nothing to halt the terrorizing. Quote, she tortured me for like 6-7 months, said Thomas, who moved into the apartment on the same day as Bowie in January. I could be dead right now, she said. Thomas recalled what she said was the first time she was threatened by the accused jihadi Jane. I was sitting in the living room area. I was on the phone with my boyfriend, and she walks past me and says, I'll bomb this whole place down. Terrified by the threat, she said she immediately called the city police and claimed she was told the issue was a he said, she said, and they were unable to take action. So much for that see something, say something. Another time, Thomas called the police because of a twisted threat Bowie allegedly screamed when she thought she was home alone. Quote, my boyfriend hears Jessica saying, do you know how easy it is to put rat poison in your food? Followed by a homophobic slur. Thomas said she immediately called the police again, who told her that they were unable to do anything about that threat either. In another instance, a squabble over garbage ended with Bowie threatening to kill Thomas, who once again called law enforcement. Officers responded to the home but were unable to speak to Bowie, who refused to come out of her room, according to Thomas. The Albany Police Department declined to comment on any potential calls made to Bowie's home. Thomas said she also called a Child Protective Service agency once after Bowie's 11-year-old son, who did not live at the house, and who she claimed Bowie allowed to smoke marijuana and Black and Mild cigars during the visits, allegedly harmed her cat. Child Protective Service agencies that operate in Albany declined to comment on any cases potentially open involving Bowie or her family. As tensions between the roommates grew, the building's landlord in May attempted to offer Bowie a room in another apartment nearby where she could be living with fellow Muslims. Those Muslim tenants refused to live with the convert, who they knew from the local mosque, after claiming she had exploded with anger after hearing a joke she did not like, according to the landlord. You know, it's interesting that there is a lot of stereotypes about Muslims and terrorism, but, apparently on the hierarchy of stereotypes and craziness that white liberal women, like even the people who are oftentimes very unfairly painted as potential terrorists, are like, yeah, no, that white liberal chick is too crazy for us. She is not living with us. Thomas said she would go down to the mosque. They would turn her away. When does a mosque turn people away, she asked. Brennan, who moved in the apartment just 2 weeks before Bowie, was asked to leave for not paying rent on July 14th, was friends with the alleged terrorist in the years before she converted to Islam. From 2016 to 2019, Brennan knew Bowie as a talented New York-based prose and poetry writer, visual artist, and a loving mother of 2 boys. She was also a recovering heroin addict who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, said Brennan. Quote, I had spoken with her about her schizophrenia diagnosis. She was very candid at that point. It was like a throwaway line. There were moments where you could definitely tell she was unwell. But Brennan, 35, who was not aware she was living in the same house as her old friend because Bowie, who joined Islam 5 years ago, did not take off her niqab at home. The two had virtually no interaction as Bowie would, quote, tunnel to her bedroom whenever she came home during the 2-week span. Bowie, who Brennan knew only as Jessica, sinisterly revealed her true identity the night she was forced out of the home after not paying rent. Quote, she turned around and she called me by my dead name, said Brennan, who's transgender. Doesn't the story just get better? I had a moment of recognition and my face had dropped. For me to see her full black garb, basically assuming a cosplay of sorts, it was very weird, and she got very, very aggressive. Instead of packing her things and leaving the apartment, Bowie allegedly started breaking plates, making threats at Brennan and her partner, Faye Savage. Savage immediately texted the Albany Police Department that Bowie had become violent. Officers responded, escorted Bowie from the property, according to texts provided to the Post. After getting tossed out, Bowie left behind a mess of items and garbage cans, including a book called Artificial Terrorist and Muslim Entrapment After 9/11. She used black marker to blot out the faces of the U.S. Marshals and presumed terrorists who were on the cover of the book. Many of Bowie's belongings, including a cache of notebooks, were seized by the FBI Thursday after her arrest, the roommate said. Court documents showed that Bowie, who's accused of plotting to attack the state capitol building with a bomb hidden in a DoorDash delivery bag, told an FBI informant she believed to be an ISIS handler that she would kill her roommates if they got wind of her plan. We're going to revisit that part of this in a moment. Bowie allegedly joined ISIS through social media earlier this year after a recruiter urged her to take an oath to obey the terrorist group leader. The pledge, according to the federal criminal complaint, was we pledge our allegiance to the commander of the faithful and the caliph of the Muslims, the Mujahid Sheikh Abu Haf al-Hashimi al-Qurashi, to listen and to obey. Bowie allegedly bought bomb materials at the Home Depot on August 5th while wearing a burqa, planned to blow up the Capitol building with help from accomplices who turned out to be FBI informants. According to federal authorities, she was arrested August 19th, has been charged with attempting to provide material support to a designated foreign terrorist organization. Now, there's 2 aspects of this that stand out to me. We're going to get a traffic update, and then I want to talk about the transgender roommate component and the fact that the FBI was aware of the fact that Bowie said, if my roommates find out about my plot, I will kill them. First, traffic. I'm Nick Reed. Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor for all of your hardscaping, your landscaping needs, your lighting needs, your drainage needs, and they are the absolute premier, the best. So if you're wanting it done on the cheap, they're not the guys to do it. If you're wanting it done right away, they're not the guys to do it. There is a wait because they are in high demand due to the quality of service and product they provide all across the spectrum. They also do maintenance stuff as well, so perhaps you have a lot in terms of keep up in order to keep things looking nice. Perhaps you have an estate or a business. They provide those services as well. You can go to hunterhardscapes.com and see all that they provide, before and after pics of much of their work, and there's even a cost estimation calculator plus reviews. It's actually a great site. hunterhardscapes.com. Also Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. The alleged ISIS terror plotter, liberal white woman who was arrested last week, had two roommates, one that was transgender and then another one that apparently was not. And they told the New York Post that between the two of them, about 7 different times they called law enforcement because she had threatened to blow up the building. She threatened to murder them. And each time it was like, well, nothing we can really do about it. All right. The transgender roommate said so this is a weird part of it. She actually knew the terrorist, but did not know she was the terrorist. The transgender roommate by the name of Brennan said that she knew this gal from years prior when she was totally normal. But once they moved in together as roommates, she was completely covered, and she had no idea that it was this same person she knew until she was dead named. When there was a confrontation with the alleged terrorist used the dead name of the transgender, dead name being the original name of a person before they acquire a new name. I think it's fascinating to watch the disconnect within the LGBT community and the culture of Islam. We see the Queers for Palestine. We see these LGBTQ activists that throw in, not with Israel, the only country in the Middle East in which gay rights are not only respected, but they are celebrated, but with those who throw them off roofs, who torture them, who execute them publicly in order to make a message. And it's interesting to hear a transgender actually living with someone who's Muslim, fearing her life, his life, whatever he or she is, and seeing the realities of someone who has converted to that particular religion, taking a virtue signaling bumper sticker slogan and instead it being converted to a real life experience. I'm sure that was very, a real eye opener. Off air, we were having the conversation, and Sarah noted, who would invite in a roommate that you don't even know who they are because she keeps her identity hidden, being fully clothed, including her face, fully covered. And I can guarantee you these two individuals are lefties, and they thought that they were doing something wonderful. I guarantee you they felt special that someone so deep in the Islamic religion was a roommate of theirs, almost like a collectible and a token. I'm sure they bragged to their friends about it to show how virtuous they were. The other part of this is, according to the FBI affidavit, the accused terrorist fully acknowledged and told the informant working either within the FBI or for the FBI that if she caught wind or whiff of her roommates being suspicious of her plot, she would murder them. That seems like the sort of thing that might require a degree of intervention. I mean, what are you going to say? Well, we were watching really closely to make sure she wouldn't. You can't do that. It reminds me of the Oklahoma City bombing And the John Doe number 3 or 2 or whatever the reference, it was this other individual that was seen by numerous witnesses with Timothy McVeigh, and there was even an all-points bulletin. The entire country was looking for this third person, and then suddenly the government's like, oh, no, actually there was no other person. And we would learn about FBI informants, and it became apparent to a lot of people that perhaps this was somebody that was working on behalf of the government, that was following the moves and acting in some sort of capacity on behalf of the government in order to observe and collect a case on Timothy McVeigh, but acted too late, did not go in for the arrest, and because of that, the Oklahoma City bombing got pulled off, and it was our government like, well, we can't really admit now that we were trailing the guy and let this happen. And you wonder if, in fact, this accused terrorist did decide to murder her roommates. Would the government have pretended like they had no idea that that was a threat she was making? Kind of makes you wonder how often that sort of thing happens. Springfield. I mean, I know if I were one of those victims or one of those roommates, I'd be like, excuse me, what? And nobody told us? Traffic update. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you, Springfield Livestock Marketing Center. They've got a busy week out there. Kicking off the week, they will host their cow and bull sale today, starting at 10 a.m. Tuesday, they will have their bi-weekly dairy sale and Holstein steer special. That one will start at 10 a.m. as well. Wednesday, we will broadcast live out at Mingles, and after the morning show, they will start their feeder sale at 9. And wrapping up the week, they will host their monthly horse sale on Friday evening. Now, if you can't make it out there, but there's a sale that you really want to attend, they do offer live streaming and online bidding as well. And if you ever need help hauling, they do have field reps across the listening area. Now, for more information on any of those sales that I just mentioned, visit their Facebook or even their website, springfieldlivestock.com. And of course, you can find all of their contact information under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
PBR Thunder Days, Thunder Ridge Nature Arena, Labor Day weekend, bull riding action, concert, Chris Jansen, Friday, September 4th, Miranda Lambert, Saturday, September 5th. If you want to win tickets for the whole kit and caboodle, text the keyword labor to the Pyramid Roofing Company text line 447-KSGF. That's labor, LABOR. Springfield's Talk 104.1. Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Nick Reed. If you need a great home loan, you got a home at iwantagreathomeloan.com. Talking with Alex Carricker last Friday, and it's a point I constantly try to drive home about all the different options that are available and the utilization of them as resources. And if you are continuing to rent because you think you can't own because of your credit score, or you don't have the down payment you think you need, don't let any of these self-imposed restrictions stop you from reaching out, if you are interested in perhaps home ownership, to the Carrickers and their team. You may find that some of those obstacles you think exist don't actually exist, or maybe they're not as big of obstacles as you think. If they are, then the Carrickers can work with you and tell you, hey, here's what you need to do in order to get in the place you need to be to move forward on this. And so it's just something I really try to stress, and they do as well. Don't put self-imposed limitations on yourself without talking with them first. And at the very least, if, again, maybe you're not in the position today, but if you want to be, what it is you can do in order to be in the position in the future, iwantagreathomeloan.com. And that's not just home loans, but also refinancing, reverse mortgages as well. You can also find them under Nick's endorsements, KSGF.com. So as you know, part of the Democrats' platform, particularly with what is expected to be new leadership coming in with the DSA, is to eliminate the Senate, take away the right of Americans to vote for the presidency. That's something that elected members of Congress under their plan would choose. They want to expand. They've gone from expand to the Supreme Court. You've got variations. Hakeem Jeffries is like, oh, we want to expand it. Then you have those with the DSA that just want to get rid of it altogether. They want to eliminate the border, also free rapists and murderers from prison because they're the true victims, and do away with law enforcement, the border. A lot of brilliant plans, and they're telling us this is what they plan on doing. They also want to make Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico states because they believe that will help them pack the Senate, which they want to eventually eliminate anyhow. But in the short term, and this also is sort of the divide in the Senate. There are some what would be considered more moderate Democrats that want to just keep creating new states that they believe will give them more votes in the Senate. And then, of course, some of the DSA members are talking about just eliminating the Senate altogether. You realize this is where the Democrat Party is. I mean, the divisions, like the Republican Party, the divisions are about, hey, we're spending too much money versus, no, we're not. The divisions between we need to get rid of Obamacare, no, we need to tweak Obamacare. For the Democrats, it's like, we're going to pack the Senate with Democrats. No, we should eliminate it altogether. We should scrap the Electoral College system, just throw away the Constitution. No, we need to get rid of people's right to vote altogether when it comes to the presidency. It's like, it's these two warring factions that are both radical and completely dismissive of the Constitution. Fox News went down to talk to people in Puerto Rico and asked them, this is a novel idea. Hey, what do you think about America becoming a state? Guess what they found overwhelmingly? Not so much. They apparently overwhelmingly have no interest in becoming a U.S. They kind of like it the way it is, although some say if there's a change, we should just break away altogether. Last week, Fox News interviewed Puerto Rican natives asking their thoughts. Many pointed out that if Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, becomes a state, taxes would rise and the cost of living would skyrocket. This would make life unaffordable for millions, especially since the average income for Puerto Ricans is lower than that of any state in the Union. Moreover, Puerto Rico operates under a different federal tax structure. Carly, a Puerto Rican native who now lives in Connecticut, said, I don't think it should be a state. I don't want them to do to Puerto Rico what they did to Hawaii. Of course, we know which political party runs Hawaii. I don't want taxes to spike. People's wages here are really low to maintain life here. It would benefit us to become a state. Everything would become, or it would not rather, benefit us to become a state, said one Puerto Rican. Everything would become more expensive than it already is, and locals have already been struggling for a while now. That was Alejandro from San Juan. She added it would make stuff even worse. Puerto Ricans overwhelmingly rejecting statehood in the interview, citing fears of the economic collapse, higher taxes, and the erosion of their cultural identity. All hallmarks of the Democrat Party. The irony is the reason that Democrats want Puerto Rico to be a state is because they believe the Puerto Rican people would overwhelmingly vote for Democrats, while the Puerto Rican people are rejecting everything that the Democrats want to do as a reason for not becoming a state. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't vote that way. Other Puerto Ricans cited what they viewed as the mistreatment of Puerto Ricans by the U.S. government, along with President Trump, as reasons to oppose statehood. Quote, we really don't have much of a say on what goes on in the states, a person from San Juan said. So if we become a state, how would that change? There's a lot of controversy with the president right now. We don't want to be part of that for sure. Some suggested that instead of becoming a state, Puerto Rico should seek independence and become its own country. Angeli from San Juan saying, I believe we have the full potential to become an independent country. We have been colonized for so long. What is so perfect about this is that what is one of the great sins, according to Democrats, of our country and the Western world? Of course, there's slavery, but what is another form of slavery? That we're colonizers. And what is it they're wanting to do with Puerto Rico? In the minds of many Puerto Ricans, they're wanting to just further colonize, just take us over, just make us one of the states. Is this not, according to Democrats, one of the great sins of the white person of the West? Just going in and swapping up people and declaring you're ours now? And that's exactly what the Democrats are wanting to do with Puerto Rico. Interesting, isn't it? But see, white liberals are experts at other people's lived experiences. And so I'm sure in their mind, the brown people of Puerto Rico, they just don't know what's best for them. Almost what some would call a colonizing perspective. Which surely can't be true. I mean, Democrats, if anything, are certainly not known for hypocrisy. Traffic in a moment, now the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for rain in the morning, otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 84. Tonight, mostly clear with a low around 68. For your Tuesday, mostly sunny with a high near 91 and heat index values as high as 100. And taking a look at Wednesday, mostly sunny skies with a high near 90.
Congressman Burleson joining us this morning. How do you do there, sir?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Doing fantastic. I wanted to.
We need,
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
It's raining and we really need the
I
rain,
know.
don't we?
I know. Yeah, I pulled up radar because I was thinking, man, I hope it's doing this at my house, and it looks like, and it may for a little bit off and on, drop some rain on the area, and I'm not complaining about it at all. I wanted to ask you, because I don't know that I've asked you this question, but there's so much, obviously, speculation going into the midterms. I saw Speaker Johnson saying, well, it's, a choice between common sense and the crazies. I also know that we talked last week, there was this research project done that evaluated 3,000 polls and 4 Senate election cycles and found that during the summertime, the Democrat always is about 6 points ahead of what actually occurs on Election Day. And and then even the close of Election Day, they're still up like 2.6 percentage points of what actually happens. And so I had to laugh. Last week, there was a shocking poll shows Democrats close. And then I'm like, this isn't shocking because we've learned this is what happens every single election cycle. But there still are a lot of really unknowns out there with the DSA's involvement in winning these races. On one hand, it could be new blood that gets people excited. On the other hand, it could be the crazies on display that are a turnoff for people in the general election. What's your sense on what we're looking at in terms of midterms?
Well, I think that most of the races are already decided. So this redistricting that has happened across the country, not just with Republicans, but with Democrat, with blue states, has really locked in a lot of districts. And so we're really focused on, as far as the House goes, we're really focused in on maybe at the most 24 races. So it's going to be close no matter what. But I think that's why I think the Speaker, when he says that we do have a chance because it's down to just a handful of races, and the fact that we have a huge money lead on the Democrats, I think gives at least some glimmer of hope. I would have liked it if we had done some more things, some more bills. Obviously, I've been pushing hard on healthcare reform. I think if we had done the Save America Act, that would have inspired voters. If we had done something to reduce interest rates, particularly spending reductions or cut a lot of the fraud, then, and I say that because when government reduces spending, it reduces inflation. And it's just inflationary spending is deficit spending. And so there's some things that we could have done that I wish we had done, but here we are. I also think that the war is not popular, but we're, based on the information that the president has and about Iran and its nuclear capabilities, it appeared that it was necessary. So a lot of that is headwind that we're having to face. But at the end of the day, we're talking about 24 seats as whether or not we keep the majority.
When it comes to Iran, it seems as if every day is a new, oh, we got them on the ropes now. And I think, honestly, people have tuned it out. They're not paying attention. And some of that's because there's nothing, quote, exciting going on. There's not the sort of military action that we saw in the first couple of weeks, in which it's constant bombings and taking this out and that out. And so, people lose interest for a number of reasons. And so it's the gas prices really that there's the real concern for people. But so as every day it seems like new, we have them on the ropes. I read this stuff daily, and they're saying, okay, well now really because of all the economic steps that have been taken above and beyond what have been done before, and that there really is a change of the landscape in terms of their economy, and it's just a matter of time. Is that something that is realistic, do you believe?
It could be. I think that they're going to have to spend quite a bit of time and money and resources in order to rebuild, in order to get back into the place that they were. But I also think you've got this, you've got this country that now has, we've now poked the bear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the moment that they get a chance, they're going to be doing any kind of damage to the United States in some way that they can. So if we could complete the job, that would be great in some way without having to do it, at cost of lives. And I think that from what I'm hearing today, they're looking at doing more economic sanctions. I'm surprised that there's still more economic sanctions to do. But from what the news that I'm reading is that they must have some conversations going on with some of the other nations that are purchasing oil from Iran. And if you could truly cut off the sale of every drop of oil, I think that would probably collapse the system. So that's something that they should have been pursuing for some time. Maybe they have been this entire time, and they finally have these other countries at a place where they're willing to do it. So who knows? That's anytime we can do something economically as opposed to kinetically, that's a good thing.
Well, and it's a natural question, and I know one I've asked, even though there may be an answer, when Trump says, okay, well, now we're really going to hit them hard economically. And my instinct is, well, why didn't we do that on day one? Like, why did we not hit them with everything? But then I wonder, well, maybe some of it was because our partners weren't really willing to, but now it's drug on long enough to where they're like, okay, all right, we get it now. We're being harmed by this is lasting longer than we thought, so we'll go ahead and comply with your desires to participate in this. And so that's what I wonder if that's what's going on.
I agree. That's what I was speculating. Is that I think that these other nations that have been doing business with Iran, they've hit a critical point where they're just going to have to make a decision, and I think that, I mean, they're calling it on the news. Scott Bassett is calling this economic economic D-Day for Iran. So hopefully this isn't hyperbole, and this is really the administration it has some final chips to push in.
Friday, Vitae Foundation. I know you and your wife were there. Riley Gaines, how awesome was she?
She's great. So it's such a kind person, very warm, genuine individual. It was cute to see her daughter at, there and her husband. It was, they're just a beautiful family, and she gave a very good speech, and one that was sincere. It was not like a prepared speech. She just told the story from her heart, and that was awesome. And then she leaned in on her view on life and how important it is, and told the story about how, becoming a mother really kind of made it more real for her. And then she made a compelling case for Missouri to pass Amendment 3 that's coming up on the ballot, and how important that is. So that was really good. I thought it was a fantastic speech.
Finally, anything, we're talking with Congressman Burleson, that isn't getting quite the attention, whether it's something you're working on or others, that you want to make sure people know about?
Well, we're getting ready to go do a groundbreaking for I-44. This is, we're seeing I-70 and that project and its completion, and I think we have been focused on, since I got elected, trying to make sure that we do the same thing here, and that is that we expand I-44 all the way from, I want it expanded from Joplin all the way to St. Louis. And I'll be obviously fighting the most for this area, but we're going to be having a groundbreaking this morning at 10 a.m. for one of the sections, particularly that the new exit that's being worked on, and that interchange at 13 is going to be such a critical change. And I know that anytime we have this kind of construction, it's painful,
Right.
and it's annoying. And I've, you know, so Sonia Anderson, who works in my office, she uses that every day, and and we were talking about how and how annoying that construction period is going to be.
Oh,
But
yeah.
at the end of the day, it's going to be so beautiful when it's done, and it'll be so all the congestion and the pain that people feel today will be over. And I think that the design for that is a really good design. I'm pleased with what turned out. I'm not always pleased with everything that MoDOT does. In fact, we've gone to war over a few of their designs. They tried to do one at 125 and 60 that was just going to be a complete and total mess for the constituents and for the community. They were going to try to take that intersection and go east almost, I mean, just halfway to Rogersville. And the people that live on 125 were livid about it. And we had to, I mean, I think I had probably half a dozen Zoom calls with MoDOT during COVID, and just getting more aggressive each and every Zoom call until we finally, and then negotiating, getting money from the communities, from the counties, to compel MoDOT to go to like the traditional design and keep the interchange right there at 125. So it's not. I'm giving you kind of backstory of what
Right.
we have to do all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the boring part of the job, but it does have tremendous impact on the community, and so I'll be at that groundbreaking and excited to see that project begin.
Congressman Burleson, as always, great pleasure to talk with you, and we'll talk with you again soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, sir. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. PBR Thunder Days, Thunder Ridge Nature Arena this Labor Day weekend. It is quickly approaching. A few weeks ago, we were giving you a chance to win tickets for the whole kit and caboodle, the days of the bull riding action, then concert on Friday with Chris Jansen, Saturday with Miranda Lambert, and we have another chance for you to win tickets for that today. So every day this week, we're going to have a different keyword for you to text into the Pyramid Roofing Company text line. and every day is a separate pair of tickets. Isn't that correct? Right.
I believe so.
Yeah. So if if you register today and you don't win, then you can do a different keyword each day. And today's keyword is labor, as in Labor Day. LABOR. So text that to the Pyramid Roofing Company text line 447 KSGF. You should get a kickback if you did it successfully. And that will be your entry. Good luck. All the details, I'm sure, at ksgf.com.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a slight chance for rain in the morning, otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 84. Tonight, mostly clear with a low around 68. For your Tuesday, mostly sunny with a high near 91 and heat index values as high as 100. And for Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 90.
There was a blip in the news about President Trump doing an interview with Michael Cohen. He apparently, like everyone, has a podcast, and so I guess it actually has it's not just a podcast, but an actual radio show on WABC. Now, Cohen, of course, was Trump's attorney, and then he was Alvin Bragg had that huge case against Trump. The quote. This would have been, the hush money case, in which Cohen was suddenly claiming, that Donald Trump was paying hush money, and that the hush money to Stormy Daniels was deliberately hidden in violation of law because it was labeled as something else, and then there were however many different charges that Bragg brought, and everyone that was objective recognized the ludicrous nature of this for a number of reasons. And in fact, this was the case that many legal experts couldn't really even explain what exactly the allegation was in terms of this windy, twisty path of okay, you're making this claim, but what does that mean? I mean, it was just all very confusing. But the entire case was built upon Michael Cohen, who was a known liar by prosecutors. Everyone knew he was a liar. And during this exchange with Donald Trump, which may answer why Donald Trump did the interview, because people are like, why on earth is Donald Trump going to do an interview or be interviewed by Michael Cohen? Because among other things, Michael Cohen said, yeah, I felt pressured by the prosecution to say what I said. This is incidentally still in the appeals process. So the very foundation of the case against Donald Trump, the entire case built upon the testimony of a man who is now acknowledging publicly, yeah, I was just kind of pressured to say that stuff. It is so stark, even the legal analyst on CNN had comments on Friday regarding the Cohen acknowledgement.
I think it's weird that money prosecution of Donald Trump 2 years ago has nothing left to stand on, because now the star witness, the guy who is the reason why every prosecutor who looked at this case, including the Biden DOJ, the prior liberal Democratic DA, passed on charging this case, is because they didn't trust Michael Cohen beyond a reasonable doubt. Alvin Bragg rolled that dice, and now Michael Cohen has said publicly that he, quote, felt pressured and coerced by prosecutors. So where do you stand on Michael Cohen now? If you believe he's a truth teller, then he felt pressured and coerced by prosecutors. That's not acceptable. If you believe he's a liar, then your case is built on a liar. So that case is going through its appeal process incredibly slowly. I think there are major legal infirmities with it, but now the factual predicate has collapsed.
Has collapsed is what he was noting there. In other words, it's amazing, you and I, non-legal experts, when this stuff is going on, just on the surface recognize, wait, this stuff doesn't even make sense. We've been told forever this Cohen guy is a liar. Now Alvin Bragg is using him as the entire foundation of his case. That you have to believe someone who is known to have perjured himself, who has long been cast by anti-Trump people as a piece of crap liar. But now you're telling us that this guy is so believable and so credible and so honest that you can build an entire case around him. You didn't have to be a legal expert to say that just doesn't make sense. And so now you have some of the very same legal experts, this one on CNN, that would lend credibility to a case like the one that Alvin Bragg brought against Donald Trump, are fully acknowledging, well, this blows the whole thing out of the water. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? But you're not going to hear a lot of coverage about this. Again, CNN, their legal analysts, their little segment here on these things, commented on it, but there won't be a great deal of coverage on it. One, because it validates what so many Americans have known for a long time, that prosecution after prosecution after prosecution of Donald Trump was political and had no legal foundation. And this is yet another example. But also, most people on the left don't really care about this anymore, because it didn't serve their purpose in the way that it was intended. I mean, they thought it was. It just didn't have the results. It served a purpose, as did the Letitia James case against Trump, the case in Georgia against Trump, the case in Florida against Trump. Like every single one of these cases, it was to try and prevent the American people from electing Donald Trump as president, to deny Americans their right to do that by bankrupting him, dragging him and his family through the mud, imprisoning him if possible, keeping him off the campaign trail, forcing him to go, they hoped so financially dry that he could not carry out a campaign as effectively and successfully, particularly if he wasn't able to be out there on the campaign trail. And so that was the goal. Ultimately, it was just to prevent the American people from picking him as president of the United States. And that didn't work. In fact, some argued it helped him, because the American people saw an entire political party, that being the Democrat Party, utilizing our law enforcement, particularly on a federal level, or in New York, the Alvin Bragg and Letitia James, openly saying, just elect me, I'll get the guy on something. And Americans didn't like that. And a lot of Americans recognize if they can do this to Donald Trump, they can do it, and they probably have been doing it to so many of us that don't have the means to fight back. And so many people believe it actually helped Donald Trump because it showed what was at stake in this country. But point being is, aside from not covering this because it validates what Trump and Trump supporters have known for a long time about our corrupt justice system, but they also really don't care. I mean, at this point, they're really just banking on killing them. I mean, that's really where their hopes and dreams are at this point, because they've realized that these attempts to try and stop him from being president through legal means has not worked for them. And it never was. There's no outrage, because no one ever truly was outraged because they believed that he was trying to hide hush money and he was violating the law in order to do it. That wasn't where their passion was. Their passion was stopping him from being president. And so this tool in their toolbox didn't work, so it doesn't matter to them anymore. Who cares? Who cares? They won't even care if it's thrown out. If the appeals court, based off of what Cohen is now acknowledging about feeling pressured, or because of any other reason, the courts are like, yeah, this is not legit. It's not going to upset them. They won't care. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers.
Thank you, the Pyramid Roofing Company. If it's been a while since you've had a checkup on your roof, now is the time to do it. And the Pyramid team, they can help you out with that. They offer free roof inspections where they take tons of photos and videos so you can see exactly what they see. And then they work with you and your insurance company every step of the way. They offer residential and commercial services and also discounts for our military and first responders on new roof installs. So if it is time to have the Pyramid team out to your home or to your business, make sure that you reach out to Josh today and schedule that free roof inspection. You can find all of their contact information under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
I forgot to play this audio earlier, so I will play it now. In the opening of the show, we talked update on flock camera stuff, Pulaski County. Over to, the more middle part of the state, they had announced that they were pulling out of their flock camera agreement or allowing it to expire. Willard, police chief, the city of Willard, have announced that they are going to also do the same, either pull out or expire, one of the two. So we're seeing this happen with an increased frequency. There was a city council meeting out. Was this San Diego, California? The Darth Vader thing.
So
Somewhere in California, where they are having flock camera concerns amongst some of the citizens, and Darth Vader showed up in order to speak during the public portion of the meeting. Now, he talked about a number of different things, not just flock cameras, but some drainage issues and so forth. So I condensed down his comments for you to hear specifically to the flock cameras. And so this is Darth Vader being called to and then coming up to speak at the city council regarding flock cameras.
The Emperor is a fan of flock, and we must continue utilizing flock technologies so that we can follow and surveil the rebel scum as they move from playground to playground, from playground to pool, from pool to gymnasium, because we all know that the flock cameras are not only following the license plate readers, they are following children. They are following children in parks and gymnasiums, and we need this. I need this so I can stalk my ex-girlfriend. This technology will help us find the rebel scum and their hidden base on Hoth. This technology will help us find Luke Skywalker as he traverses the universe in his X-Wing. This technology is a necessary force.
Thank you. Roger Ralphs?
that might be the best part. Okay, thank you. Next.
I like how they don't stop him whatsoever.
I know, they just
like, okay.
Well, it's probably the smart. That is the best tactic for these councils to make. The biggest problem or mistake these councils make whenever some citizen gets up and starts pushing back on an issue that is getting a lot of public attention is when they try to stop them or they have law enforcement remove them. There is never an upside to that. All that does is compound it. And so, yeah, the best thing to do is just let him do it. Now, this wasn't AI, but this guy was fully dressed as Darth Vader. The only thing, though, and I don't know why, he didn't have black gloves on.
I don't know.
So it was just, the full blown setup.
Yeah.
I don't know how, and not, it looked like Darth Vader. I don't know how much money this guy spent or if he created it himself, but then he didn't have gloves on for some reason. And so it just took you out of the mood somehow. But, yeah, I love how they just at the end did a little chime, boom, boom, and then okay, because apparently at that city council that means your designated time is up and it is time for the next one. But yeah, I thought that was pretty funny.
I like it.
So I wanted to share it with you. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Brookline Door Works, everyone. One of the big stressors when it comes to your garage door, because you are talking about metal components and heat and cold contracting and expanding and moving parts. And this part of the country has the wildest weather swings of any other part of the country. I mean, we see it's not all the time, but it's not completely uncommon that one day the high is 35 and then all of a sudden it's 72. You get these crazy swings, and that can have a real impact on the components of your garage door that are necessary to be consistent. And it can just slowly over time get things a little off track. If your garage door, as it opens and closes, maybe you're inside even, and you can, somebody's home, because you can hear the popping and the squeaking and the cracking, and that's not normal, so that should not be happening. Sure, you ought to hear the motor of the garage door opener itself, and a little bit of movement. But if it's loud and squeaky, you need to have routine maintenance done. You should do that anyhow. It's an annual thing that I do. I recommend you do it as well, and it's one of the areas that Brookline Door Works excels at, and it's why they're used by folks throughout the area, not just residential, but businesses, and all of the Springfield area fire departments use them too, particularly for their emergency service. 24/7, something goes wrong, and that's for residents as well. BrooklineDoorWorks.com. Keep them bookmarked. There's a story about this New York City socialist DSA, and like most of these young DSA members, they're spoiled rich kids who have never had to actually work for something in their lives, or at the very least, the wealth that they have was handed to them. One of the Democrat socialists with an incredibly appropriate nickname, the Champagne Socialist, is getting dragged after posting a message on social media. Grace Ryan, a 25-year-old chocolate heiress from Ohio who graduated from NYU, went on X last week to defend recent criticism she has received for being a rich girl cheering on socialism. Quote, everyone's trying to dunk on me for being a progressive from a privileged background, but have y'all never heard of noblesse oblige? I have a moral obligation to use my advantage to help those who are struggling. Now, this is perfect because it requires this position that some of these rich, spoiled kids take when it comes to being socialist. See, they don't give away their wealth. They don't practice what they preach. She doesn't take the wealth that she has been afforded and then build some sort of housing unit that she too will live in a one-room apartment that has communal showers and a communal kitchen, so that they can live in this socialist utopia where everyone, regardless of economic status, because there is no economic status, we're all just exactly the same. See, she doesn't do that, does she? These socialists never do that. The brilliance of this position is that it requires them to not do it, see? She argues that it is her obligation with this wealth to spread the word. Now, spread the word, not the wealth. So what she's saying is the reason that she is listened to, the reason that she and other rich Democrat socialists are able to make an impact is because they have influence, they have all this money. If they gave that money away, they no longer would be able to take on the noble cause. So in an effort to have an impact for true economic justice, in which we have a classless system, they have to keep their wealth. Now, isn't that convenient? They have to stay rich. They can't live in an actual socialist environment, because if they do, they will no longer be able to fight for the little guy. These people, they are really something else. This is socialism. I know I say it a lot, but this is what it looks like. The people in charge have everything while everybody else lives on this one, level degree of misery that is dictated by the spoiled rich living in their opulent lifestyles of their mansions, which they are morally obligated to do so they can continue to help the little people. What a life. This is what happens when you hand people everything and they don't work for it. They don't recognize and understand the value of work. They think that things just magically happen. Hence their belief in socialism. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is back in the news. You know this?
Ooh, what'd she do this time?
Well, apparently there were some leaked recordings from her jailhouse calls in which she was using the N-word. So she's apologizing for that.
Oh, Gypsy.
What's crazy is that there will be some people that were fans of hers despite, the killing thing. But that will be over the edge for them.
Yep. That is 100%
well, no, that's just
true.
a step too
That's
far.
Too far.
That's way too far. All right. The WNBA continues to be an embarrassment unto itself. And I mean, this whole thing is just the most ridiculous, self-imposed train wreck I think I've ever seen roll out. Remember when the Cracker Barrel debacle seemed like a big deal? That is nothing compared to this suicide mission that the left is on to completely destroy the WNBA. The latest is regarding a last night's game, Indiana Fever, and former NBA player Enes Kanter Freedom was there. This was against Chicago Sky. And he was wearing a shirt that said, women, definition, human female. So he's, it's women's rights t-shirt. And you would think of all places in the world, of course, that this would be an absolute no-brainer, but only with women on the left who are crazy would this be a problem. Standing up for women's rights gets you thrown out of a WNBA game. Now, at the time, what all anyone knew what happened was one of the Chicago Sky players, Natasha Cloud, Cantor's, sitting there on the court there in the seats, and so she starts hollering something at him, and he kind of stands up and does his arms open like, "What do you got?" That sort of gesture, and then he was asked to leave, and he's like, "Why? I'm here defending women. Like, really, I'm being thrown out of the WNBA because I'm standing up for women's rights." Yeah, you are. This is the liberal woman. Apparently, what she had yelled at him was regarding Sophie Cunningham. And she yelled, "She's not going to sleep with you." So, of course, he's like, so he stands up, and I'm telling you, everything that the WNBA does proves the point of the pro-female side of things, the women's rights side. And when you see the visual of him standing up and how he towers over even the tallest player in the WNBA, or at least that was on the court at that time, the visual just makes it so clear how insanely absurd this continued argument is from people on the left that there's no advantage whatsoever men who identify as women playing in women's sports. It puts the left in this uncomfortable position, and I'm waiting to see if there is a narrative that escalates regarding the threatening nature of what he did. Because we know how the left loves to talk about toxic masculinity, and if the left, particularly women on the left, are going to accuse him of being threatening and physically intimidating, because that, too, of course, counters their entire argument that there is no difference physically between men and women when it comes to sports. I mean, you have these conditioned women who are so trained and obedient that they will pitch a fit at a man who is there supporting women's rights. I don't know, frankly, that they have the mental capacity to understand that they are working against themselves, not just when it comes to the sport, but their own argument. And the fact that every display of anger against any of these former NFL or NBA players that is, out of its anger, and it accuses them of, being misogynistic, or accuses them of trying to be divisive, is proving his point. If they truly, genuinely believed that being a woman is whatever a person wants that to be, that if all someone has to do is self-identify, that's the whole term, right? Self-identify, not with approval of others. If they really, truly, genuinely believed in this, they would all be scrambling to have, these guys play on their teams. But what is happening here is they're exposing themselves as not even believing their own tripe, because their position is, well, now he doesn't really believe that. He doesn't count. He's just trying to make a point. I'm sorry, I thought the term self-identify meant all that was important is what the self identifies. So suddenly it's self-identify unless you don't agree with the reason that the man is identifying as a woman, then no longer self-identifying is relevant. Either a person gets to choose his or her own gender, or they don't. Because here's what they're doing. They're doing exactly what they claim transphobic people are doing. What is their claim about transphobic people? Well, you're telling them what they really are. You're assigning a gender at birth. Well, what are you assigning to these former NBA players who are men that say that they're women, that are throwing their hat in the ring for the draft? Are you not assigning gender to them? Because you feel, in your opinion, they're not really somebody who feels like a woman? This is the corner that the left has backed themselves into, and this is why they just scream transphobia. Because every bit of logic is against them. Every bit of fact is against them. Every bit of science is against them. So all they can do is scream and name call. That is the very basis of their argument. Or what they do is pretend as if they are defending, and it's bizarre because it's young people as well. Do you notice that this argument, when it comes to the WNBA, isn't one about kids, right? Because the WNBA is filled with adults. Yet what is the left always doing? Oh, they'll wear shirts. Trans kids are important too. Who's talking about kids? This is an adult league. This isn't even about, now, Sophie Cunningham, when asked off the court her opinion about this issue, she did talk about girls, but in the context of the WNBA, this is not a kid's sport, so why do they keep trotting out the kids? Because that's what the left always does. When they don't have truth on their side, when they don't have logic on their side, they bring out people that you aren't supposed to criticize, and of course, kids, we're doing it for the kids. The Seattle Times lost sports columnist Matt Calkins. He resigned on Thursday because he, who had spent 11 years at the outlet, had written a piece on this from the perspective of young girls who want to only be forced to compete, or not forced, but allowed to compete against other girls. They don't want to be forced to compete against boys, because we hear so much about the pro-transgender side. And he's like, well, how about we just let's talk to some of these girls, hear what they think. Some of these young girls that are in sports that are either worried about or are forced to compete against boys. The Seattle Times refused to print his article. Completely censored it. Zero. No, we're not going to give the perspective of girls and women. Unless, of course, they say men get the final say. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for rain in the morning, otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 84. Tonight, mostly clear with a low around 68. For your Tuesday, mostly sunny with a high near 91 and heat index values as high as 100. And for Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 90.
All right, Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you, Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. We're finally getting a little bit of a break from the super duper hot weather, but hey, it's still hot out there, which means that your AC is still running nonstop. Now, if you experience any issues with your HVAC, I do want to recommend the fine folks over at Foreman Mechanical. Now, they do have an annual maintenance program that is a great option, but they can also help you out with repairs and even new unit installs. They work on all major brands, by the way, and they also do residential and commercial services. So if it is time to have the Foreman team out to your home or to your business, make sure that you reach out to Russell at foremanmechanical.com. And of course, you can find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Pyramid Roofing Company text line. It would not surprise me if all of the owners of the WNBA made a pact to not draft any of the NBA players. Hopefully one of them will break rank. Now, apparently, that is known to be very, at the very basic, illegal to do that. And I've just listened to and read a number of different sports commentary pieces on why it is that the WNBA has really created a bad situation for themselves is because with the draft and at least one former NBA player saying, "Yeah, I'm in this thing." So he went through the requirements. There's a certain number of requirements, and he fits them all. other than not being a woman, but that's something that WNBA has not defined. They will not define it, so it means just whatever you want it to mean. And at the same time, it is apparently against the law for the different teams to sort of coordinate and collaborate on banning someone. And so they can't do that, or at least they're not supposed to. Now, I suppose it'll be a wink and a nod of not drafting him, but that will just prove his point as well. I mean, this is the brilliance of this move. It will prove the point that they know that gender, that sex is biological, it's scientific, and this will be their acknowledgement of it. This move has really backed them into a corner. Now, they may not acknowledge it to themselves. They may, again, take the position, well, he's clearly just doing this to make a point, and so he's not really a woman. Well, that runs counter to the left's entire narrative that people self-identify. What, unless you don't want them to self-identify? That's what you accuse transphobic people of doing, is assigning gender. The only difference is the transphobic people who assign gender at birth are going based off of science, chromosomes, as opposed to those that want to claim that NBA male players are just pretending to be the opposite gender. So what, you're mind readers? That's not very scientific. This is part of why all this is interesting. I see some of these headlines also. Sophie Cunningham, and they're in headlines, MAGA Barbie. Now, the Barbie part I understand. Pretty blonde chick. What is MAGA about her? This is an individual that the only reference to politics she's ever made is that she doesn't really follow them. The left apparently has conceded the women's rights issue being a MAGA issue. That when it comes to standing up for girls in sports and women in sports, they apparently are fully conceding that that is part of MAGA America. Standing up for young girls, standing up for women. They've already conceded that they are on the opposite side of science because the scientific definition of women that are being worn on T-shirts, they themselves has said that is anti-trans. That the scientific terminology is in opposition to their belief. So they've conceded that they're not science, that science is on the side of the women's rights movement here, and apparently that is also the side of MAGA America. There's one other article that I thought was such a brilliant self-own. It is from The Spun, S-P-U-N. I don't know if this is a sports outlet, but the story is by Andrew Holleran. Sophie Cunningham supporters show embarrassing lack of WNBA knowledge. Another pro-Sophie Cunningham demonstration took place outside of a WNBA arena Saturday night. The New York Liberty hosted the Indiana Fever at Barclays Center. Fever fell to the Liberty 109-102 in a tight game outside the arena. Several pro-Sophie Cunningham and anti-transgender athletes supporters gathered to show support for the Indiana Fever Guard. On the opposite side, pro-transgender athlete supporters gathered as well. Sportico caught up with several fans on both sides of the issue, asking them to name 5 WNBA players. Many supporters of Cunningham could not do it. One Cunningham supporter said, "I can name Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark. That's all I've got." Another Cunningham supporter said, "No, I can't. I'm sorry." One said, "I sure can." One Cunningham supporter said, "Sophie Cunningham is always fun. Caitlin Clark, Reese, A.J. Wilson." I already said Caitlin Clark. Another saying, "Probably not. No, I could name Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark. That's it." One WNBA fan wrote on social media, "If Sophie's bringing eyes to the sport, you would think they could have at least mentioned 5 other players from the Fever. Welp, I hope they enjoyed watching Ellie and see the Liberty win. Another saying it's almost like one side actually cares about women's sports, the other's doing performatively to culture war hijack the midterms. Now, this is such a cell phone by the left in the WNBA. The reason all of these Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark fans cannot list off a roster of 5 or more WNBA players is because they're new fans. This is exactly what the WNBA has been bitching about for years, that they weren't high profile, that Americans weren't paying attention. What is it that we have to do in order to get new people to come watch? And they are. Because of Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark, the people you're trying to destroy. That's what happens when you have new fans. They're new to the game. They don't know the players. Probably many of them don't even know the rules. But they are coming to the games. They're buying tickets. They're buying jerseys and T-shirts and sneakers. But they're new. It's like somebody who finds some band that's been around for a while, but they're a new fan. Yeah, they can't list for you all the tracks off every album. They may not even know all the band player names because they're new. Now, the old, tried and true, very narrow supporters, many of which don't even bother to show up for games, that have kept the WNBA hemorrhaging money and so lacking in widespread popularity, it was a mockery. Yeah, they're going to be able to name all these different players. So you have an option. You either stay irrelevant or you grow. And when you grow, you're going to have new people. And those new people aren't going to know all of these rosters. They're not going to know all of the players. They're probably not even going to know all the teams. And you're going to trash on them now? I mean, that's a brilliant move, trashing on the new, fresh fan base. Instead of embracing them and highlighting them, make fun of them, demonize them. Angel Reese is one of the players that has been extremely bitter about the popularity, particularly of Caitlin Clark, and they have a history of their careers. But Sophie Cunningham as well. And in fact, she oftentimes insists that she's the real reason for all of the new fan base. If that were the case, don't you think this new fan base would be able to mention your name as opposed to Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark as the only two players they know? Pyramid Roofing Company, text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. hear the mentioned sponsorship of the characters. I want a great homeloan.com. One of the reasons that so many people brag about their experience with Emily Johnson House Theory Realty is because of all the connections she has. And so much of that comes to surface when it comes to any home improvements that are needed. You get a buyer, but the buyer wants you to fix about 3 or 4 different things in the home. And sure, you know how to find maybe a foundational fixer-upper, or getting one of those, if you got a crawl space, the vapor, whatever that's called. What's that vapor thing? Vapor barrier, yeah. But you're like, I don't know who's good. I don't know who's going to rip me off. I don't know who's fly-by-night. Emily Johnson has all those connections, but she also works closely with the characters. And let me tell you, while sometimes that doesn't necessarily come into play, but if there are hiccups when it comes to the home loan process and everything's been approved, but suddenly there's this little goof, having the person who is helping you with your home purchase and the person who is responsible for your home loan know one another and work well with one another can be all the difference in the world. And so one of the many additional reasons that people recommend, including myself, for all of your home buying and home selling needs, Emily Johnson House Theory Realty.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozark's first meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a slight chance for rain in the morning, otherwise mostly cloudy skies with a high near 84. Tonight, mostly clear with a low around 68. For your Tuesday, mostly sunny with a high near 91 and heat index values as high as 100. And taking a look at Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 90.
Tim Robbins, actor, extreme left-winger, one of those for a period of time. He was very vocal when it came to his political beliefs. And of course, it was during a period of time he was married to Susan Sarandon, or they were, I think they were officially married. If not, they were together for a very long time. And so it was often in tandem with one another that they would speak out politically. Very, it wasn't someone who just had disagreements with Republican policies, but believed them, or at least accused them of being, racist and just horrible human beings. I've noticed that he hasn't been as vocal as he used to be. He used to just be one of the top 5 most vocal Hollywood people. I would argue even before Hollywood people really began just bombarding us. We've always known that they were on the left. When you're that wealthy, you can afford to be a Democrat. And so it's been known. But when social media came along, and then Trump in particular, it became this sort of litmus test. You had to prove that you were anti-Trump. So people became very vocal. But all of a sudden, Tim Robbins just, I don't know, he did not seem to be as vocal. And I remember at some point thinking, has he changed a little bit? Has his perspective on things changed? Or did he just think we're doing more harm than good by being these really rich people that are being the face of the Democrat Party? Then I came across this clip of a podcast interview that he was doing in which he talked about a conversation he had with some Romanians. And now this is just one snippet, and it by no means is something that could be considered a reflection of Tim Robbins' perspective as a whole. But I certainly found this revelation that he expressed, given his conversation with some Romanians, to be somewhat interesting.
I asked, what was the uptake on the vaccines in Romania? And they said something like 40%. I said, well, how do you explain that? And they said, well, we lived under the Soviet Union for many years, so we know how to look like we comply when we're not complying. And I said, what else reminds you of the Soviet Union? They said, without a doubt, cancel culture. I said, why? I said, well, Soviet Union used to keep files on all of us, right? So as long as you're a good party member, there wouldn't be a thing said.
Yeah.
But once you stepped out of line, they brought out that old file. Now that affair with your secretary from 30 years ago is going to ruin your life. They're going to ruin your family. They're going to kill your career. And they're going to make a big public display of it to show other people to stay in line. And they felt like cancel culture was basically operating in the same way as the Soviet Union did. And it was really interesting to see that perspective in Eastern Europe.
Yeah. Cancel culture is a tool of authoritarian regimes, and that could be a culture authoritarian regime, which is what we see on the left. Now, the left has, like they do everything else, attempted to hijack and change what cancel culture means. So, for example, their favorite go-to podcaster, Hassan Piker, who says, Americans who died on 9/11 deserved it, and babies who were killed on October 7th, they were occupiers too, so they're fair game to be raped and put in ovens. And I mean, this guy is truly as sick as some of the most sickest human beings to walk the earth. And whenever you have normal people recoil at that sort of vile and disgusting commentary, they say that, Republicans, here they are. This is cancel culture. That's not what cancel culture is. Cancel culture, as Tim Robbins noted here, is if you step out of political line, they will just find anything from the past to hound you with, even if it has nothing whatsoever to do with the issue at hand. So as he gave the example, this was communicated to him from former Soviet citizen, that if you got out of line with the political class, they would get out that file and, you had an affair with your secretary 30 years ago. Now, that had nothing to do with anything of the current day, but it was something that they could use to try and destroy you. That's what the left does today. We saw it with really, I think the first real powerful go at this by the left was the founder, president, CEO of Chick-fil-A. and it was during the gay marriage debate, and he was asked his opinion, and he's like, I'm a Christian, I believe between man and a woman. Well, they set out to destroy his entire business because he got out of line. He was asked a question in order to make sure he understood the proper answer, and when he did not, they sought to punish. Same thing's going on with Sophie Cunningham right now. Generally, when this cancel culture comes up, not always, it's because they were asked. It is a form of almost soft interrogation in order to make sure that you know the right answer, and if you don't get it, and if you don't give it, then we'll get out the file and we'll pummel you to death. And with Sophie Cunningham, she was asked, she did not bring it up. This is just one of the latest examples. And no, she believes in women's rights, and that's the wrong answer. And so they come after her with everything that they can, remove her from society. So we have nothing other than obedient citizens, obedient subjects who know what they're supposed to believe, when they're supposed to believe it, and are ready at any given moment to give the proper answers. The left operates the same way that the Soviet Union operated, that you get in North Korea in terms of the demand for obedience, East Germany, China. You just go through the list of these authoritarian regimes. Yet, of course, they do what authoritarian regimes generally do. They point to the people who are a danger to their authority. Those are usually liberty, freedom-loving individuals, and claim that they are the true tyrants. They are the ones that are the danger. And is this not what they say about somebody like Donald Trump? And that they will say about every candidate that comes along that is not compliant with their authoritarian belief system, that they are the true tyrants, they are the fascists, while they are demanding you display your obedience for the world to see. Otherwise, you will be punished. And I thought it was very interesting that Tim Robbins relayed this story and kind of indicated that he thought that was pretty interesting, perhaps had not thought of it that way before. The truth is an amazing thing, and it's why the left is for censorship. Because they fear what it does. They fear what people will do if they know the truth. This is why they're big into censorship. The socialists in Germany, a.k.a. the Nazis, were known for, among other things, burning books. There were these visuals of these huge piles of books that were being burned. Today's version of that is internet censorship. It's the same purpose. It is to prevent people from having access to information, and just trying to cut off that access to people that you don't want them to have. And that's why books were burned. At the time, that was the source of information for people to gather. Well, today it's the internet. The internet today is the books of yesteryears. And so you don't burn the internet. What you do is you censor it. And this is what we saw during the Biden administration. And people like, of course, Zuckerberg and so many others that were responsible for these different social media sites would eventually acknowledge that censorship was in play, that if people were wanting to provide information regarding COVID or Hunter Biden's laptop or Joe Biden's senility, if it were in the form of a book, they would have burned it. It was not, so what did they do? They banned it, so you did not have access to that information. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Ozarks elder law, all about planning. No planning at all, that is bad planning. It's worse than just not, it is not doing anything, but then that turns everything over to the government by default. Government will decide where your stuff goes. You don't have medical power of attorney. You think, oh, well, hey, I'm married. Doesn't work that way. Not in Missouri. We mistakenly think that's the case because oftentimes hospitals defer to the spouse. They're like, well, here are the options, and what would you like to do? And okay, we'll go ahead. But if the hospital decides, you know what, we got too many people in the waiting room. We don't have enough beds available. Or, well, we've got somebody waiting on a new pair of healthy lungs, and they decide that life-saving measures are not something that they feel are in the best interest of your husband or wife, you don't get to make that decision unless you do. If you legally have it in writing, legal documents, and that's one of the many things Ozark elder law does. So whether it is medical power of attorney or other forms of power of attorney, financial oftentimes comes into play. Whether you need a will or a trust, the best way to do it to make sure your family's protected from government coming in and taking money from them by way of taxes. Ozarks elder law, free consultation, 10 area locations. And the consultation isn't just, oh, well, here's what you need to do. It is, here's the information we need from you so we can look over it and know exactly what you need to do. Then we will, as a courtesy, let you know these are the documents you need brought up. You need to do these things. This is what it'll cost one time. And then you decide if you want to do it. It's that easy. OzarksElderLaw.com. Also under Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. Now, speaking of the book-burning left, which is, again, the modern version of that is censorship, particularly of social media, or it is what Gavin Newsom signed into law Saturday, the Stop Nick Shirley Act. Newsom signing it into law Saturday, just days after a radical left-wing operative crashed the journalist's Capitol interview and launched a crude personal attack on him. Assembly Bill 2624 expands California's Safe at Home program to employees of nonprofits that serve people navigating the immigration system. Critics have noted the measure being a way to intimidate people trying to shine light on bad behaviors, such as Shirley's investigative reports on fraud in California and Minnesota. Now, Nick Shirley, the media likes to claim this guy's not a journalist. So he doesn't count. Freedom of speech, freedom of press does not apply to him because he doesn't work for a corporation. You have to work for some big for-profit corporation, according to the left, to be considered a journalist. But even if that's the case, what does it say about journalism? That you think of everything we've learned about the Somali fraud, that is because of Nick Shirley. That is because he did what journalists are supposed to do, and that is track down stories. Or if you see that there's allegations of corruption, you get on the beat. You start talking with people. You start asking questions. You don't simply rewrite press releases that your favorite government entity sends you. And so there's the program as it existed in its previous form covered domestic violence survivors, elder abuse victims, and reproductive and gender-affirming health care workers by providing substitute mailing addresses for people considered particularly vulnerable to target attacks and violent threats. And so I guess initially was sold as, hey, this is to protect if you've got some woman who is the victim of domestic violence, it is to protect her from some psychopath husband or ex-boyfriend that is going to come after her and try to do her harm. Well, now they're applying it to journalists. And specifically covering individuals that are working in what is supposed to be daycare centers or immigration right outfits. And this is because this is where so much of the fraud is being found. And so in a country in which we are supposed to have free speech, we are supposed to be critical of government. We are supposed to not be punished for being critical of government. We're supposed to have the freedom to talk about those things. They have made it illegal to do so in California. If I remember correctly, I don't see it in this piece, that it calls for up to $4,000 in fines if you are found to be, quote, harassing any of the scam artists in California. Now, I imagine that this will reach the Supreme Court at some point, because if this isn't considered a violation of the First Amendment, then nothing is. Government creating laws to punish people who expose corruption, and of course, which political party is behind it. And where are the journalists that are always screaming about the chilling effects on the press and the chilling effects on free speech due to Donald Trump calling them names? Where is the outrage? Where is Jimmy Kimmel and these others who claim that they're the great champions of freedom of speech to lash out against this? Interesting that they seem to not care. Because it's never about freedom for them. It is about authoritarianism, and it is about silencing those that step out of line. Be it a Joe Rogan, be it a Sophie Cunningham, be it a Sydney Sweeney, be it a Nick Shirley. Be it you, who simply wanted to post on social media questions about masks during COVID, or questions or comments or information you've learned about ivermectin. You too, targeted by the authoritarian left in this country, many of you. But they say you, MAGA people, are the true authoritarians. Ozarks First had a story. It's a local look at Trump's announcement about beef and loosening up tariffs in order to bring down the price of beef in the country. And suddenly, tariffs are a good thing. Beef tariff pause creates concern for Ozarks farmers. While the 90-day pause on beef tariffs may have some consumers hopeful, local farmers are expressing their concerns over how the decision will impact their business. And then it talks to, and this is a great article, Some of these farmers that are like, yeah, this is going to allow consumers access to a market that sells cheaper product, and that's harmful for us. And there is absolute truth to that. But what this demonstrates is this entire position that is taken by the media that all tariffs are bad is a total BS line. And like everything else, the issue of tariffs is just something that they use as a weapon against Donald Trump. So here we've heard how long tariffs are awful, they're horrible, they are harmful to the consumer, they're harmful to businesses, and now with an easing on tariffs, how good tariffs are and how easing the tariffs are bad for us. The fact of the matter is with tariffs, it's a mixed bag. It's situational. It is not one size fits all as it's treated by the left and the media and some